My name is Derek Walcott, and I shall be reading from my poetry. Omeros, Book 1, Chapter 1. This is how one sunrise we cut down them canoes. Philoctet smiles for the tourists who try taking his soul with their cameras. Once wind bring the news to the Laurier Canal, their leaves start shaking the minute the axe of sunlight hit the cedars, because they could see the axes in our own eyes. Wind lift the ferns. They sound like the sea that feed us fishermen all our life. And the ferns nodded, yes, the trees have to die. So fists jam in our jacket, 'cause the heights was cold and our breath making feathers like the mist, we passed the rum. When it came back, it gave us the spirit to turn into murderers. I lift up the axe and pray for strength in my hands to wound the first cedar. Dew was filling my eyes, but I fire one more white rum, then we advance. For some extra silver under a sea almond, he shows them a scar made by a rusted anchor, rolling one trouser leg up with the rising moan of a conch. It has puckered like the corolla of the sea urchin. He does not explain its cure. It have some things, he smiles, worth more than $1. He has left it to a garrulous waterfall to pour out his secret down La Saucière, since the tall laurels fell, for the ground dove's mating call to pass on its note to the blue tacit mountains, whose talkative brooks, carrying it to the sea, turn into idle pools where the clear minnows shoot, and an egret stalks the reeds with one rusted cry as it stabs and stabs the mud with one lifting foot. Then silence is sawn in half by a dragonfly as eels sign their names along the clear bottom sand. When the sunrise brightens the river's memory and the waves of huge ferns are nodding to the sea's sound. Although smoke forgets the earth from which it ascends, and the nettles guard the holes where the laurels were killed, an iguana hears the axes, clouding each lens over its lost name, when the hunched island was called Iwanalao, where the iguana is found. But taking its own time, the iguana will scale the rigging of vines in a year, its dewlap fanned, its elbows akimbo, its deliberate tail moving with the island. The slit pods of its eyes ripened in a pause that lasted for centuries, that arose with the arawak smoke, till a new race unknown to the lizard stood measuring the trees. These were their pillars that fell, leaving a blue space for a single god, where the old gods stood before. The first god was a gommier. The generator began with a whine, and a shark with sidewise jaw sent the chips flying like mackerel over water into trembling weeds. Now they cut off the saw, still hot and shaking, to examine the wound it had made. They scraped off its gangrenous moss, then ripped the wound clear of the net of vines that still bound it to this earth and nodded. The generator whipped back to its work, and the chips flew much faster as the shark's teeth gnawed evenly. They covered their eyes from the splintering nest. Now over the pastures of bananas the island lifted its horns. Sunrise trickled down its valleys, blood splashed on the cedars, and the grove flooded with the light of sacrifice. A gommier was cracking, its leaves an enormous tarpaulin with the ridge pole gone. The creaking sound made the fishermen leap back as the angling mast leant slowly towards the troughs of ferns. Then the ground shuddered under the feet in waves. Then the waves passed. Achille looked up at the hole the laurel had left. He saw the hole silently healing with the foam of a cloud like a breaker. Then he saw the swift crossing the cloud surf, a small thing far from its home, confused by the waves of blue hills. A thorn vine gripped his heel. He tugged it free. Around him, other ships were shaping from the shore. With his cutlass, he made a swift sign of the cross, his thumb touching his lips while the height rang with axes. He swayed back the blade and hacked the limbs from the dead god, knot after knot, wrenching the severed veins from the trunk as he prayed, "Tree, you can be a canoe, or else you cannot." The bearded elders endured the decimation of their tribe without uttering a syllable of that language they had uttered as one nation. The speech taught their saplings, from the towering babble of the cedar to green vowels of bois campêche. The bois flow held its tongue with the laurier cannelle. The red-skinned logwood endured the thorns in its flesh, while the arawak's patois crackled in the smell of a resinous bonfire that turned the leaves brown with curling tongues, then ash, and their language was lost. Like barbarians striding columns they have brought down, the fishermen shouted. The gods were down at last. Like pygmies, they hacked the trunks of wrinkled giants for paddles and oars. They were working with the same concentration as an army of fire ants. But vexed by the smoke for defaming their forest, blow darts of mosquitoes kept needling Achille's trunk. He frotted white rum on both forearms that at least those he flattened to asterisks would die drunk. They went for his eyes. They circled them with attacks that made him weep blindly. Then the host retreated to high bamboo like the archers of Arawaks running from the muskets of cracking logs, routed by the fire's banner and the remorseless axe hacking the branches. The men bound the big logs first with new hemp and, like ants, trundled them to a cliff to plunge through tall nettles. The logs gathered that thirst for the sea which their own vined bodies were born with. Now the trunks in eagerness to become canoes plowed into breakers of bushes, making raw holes of boulders, feeling not death inside them, but use, to roof the sea, to be hulls. Then on the beach, coals were set in their hollows that were chipped with an adze. A flatbed truck had carried their rope-bound bodies. The charcoals smoldering cored the dugouts for days till heat widened the wood enough for ribbed gunnels. Under his tapping chisel, Achille felt their hollows exhaling to touch the sea, lunging towards the haze of bird-printed islets, the beaks of their parted boughs. Then everything fit. The pirogues crouched on the sand like hounds with sprigs in their teeth. The priest sprinkled them with a bell, then he made the swift sign. When he smiled at Achille's canoe, "In God we troust," Achille said, "Leave it, is God's spelling and mine." After Mass one sunrise, the canoes entered the troughs of the surpliced shallows, and their nodding prows agreed with the waves to forget their lives as trees. One would serve Hector, and another Achilles. Achille peed in the dark, then bolted the half door shut. It was rusted from sea blast. He hoisted the fish pot with the crab of one hand. In the hole under the hut, he hid the cinder block step. As he neared the depot, the dawn breeze salted him, coming up the gray street, past sleep-tight houses, under the sodium bars of street lamps, to the dry asphalt scraped by his feet. He counted the small blue sparks of separate stars. Banana fronds nodded to the undulating anger of roosters, their cries screeching like red chalk drawing hills on a board. Like his teacher, waiting, the surf kept chafing at his deliberate walk. By the time they met at the wall of the concrete shed, the morning star had stepped back, hating the odor of nets and fish guts. The light was hard overhead, and there was a horizon. He put the net by the door of the depot, then washed his hands in its basin. The surf did not raise its voice. Even the ribbed hounds around the canoes were quiet. A flask of l'absinthe was passed by the fishermen, who made smacking sounds and shook at the bitter bark from which it was brewed. This was the light that Achille was happiest in, when, before their hands gripped the gunwales, they stood for the sea width to enter them, feeling their day begin. Chapter 2. Hector was there, Theophile also. In this light they have only Christian names: Placide, Pancreas, Chrysostom, Maljo, Philoctet, with his head white as the coiled surf. They shipped the lances of oars, placed them parallel in the grave of the gunwales like man and wife. They scooped the leaf bills from the planks, loosened knots from the bodies of flour sack sails, while Hector at the shallow's edge gave a quick thanks with the sea for a font before he waded thigh in. The rest walked up the sand with identical stride except for foam-haired Philoctet, the sore on his shin still unhealed like a radiant anemone. It had come from a scraping, rusted anchor. The pronged iron peeled the skin in a backwash. He bent to the foam, sprinkling it with a salt hiss. Soon he would run hobbling to the useless shade of an almond with locked teeth, then wave them off from the shame of his smell. And once more they would leave him alone under its leoparding light. This sunrise, the same damn business was happening. He felt the saw twitch its wires up to his groin. With his hop-and-drop limp hand clutching one knee, he left the printed beach to crawl up the early street to Ma Kilman's shop. She would open and put the white rum within reach. His shipmates watched him. Then they hooked hands like anchors under the hulls, rocking them. The keels sheared dry sand till the wet sand resisted, rattling the oars that lay parallel amidships. Then, to the one sound of curses and prayers, and the logs jammed as a wedge, one after one, as their tins began to rattle, the pirogues slid to the shallow's nibbling edge towards the encouraging sea. The loose logs swirled in surf face down like warriors from a battle lost somewhere on the other shore of the world. They were dragged to a place under the manchineels to lie there face upward, the sun moving over their brows with the stare of myrmidons hauled up by the heels, high up from the tide mark where the pale crab burrows. The fishermen brushed their palms. Now all the canoes were riding the pink morning swell. They drew their bows gently the way grooms handle horses in the sunrise, flicking the ropes like reins, pinned to them by the nose. Praise him, morning star, St. Lucia, light of my eyes. Threw bailing tins in them, unfolded their bodies across the tilting hulls, then sculled one oar in the slack of the stern. Hector rattled out his bound canvas to gain ground with the gulls, hoping to come back before that conch-colored dusk low pelicans cross. 7 seas rose in the half-dark to make coffee. Sunrise was heating the ring of the horizon, and clouds were rising like loaves. By the heat of the glowing iron rose, he slid the saucepan's base onto the ring and anchored it there. The saucepan shook from the weight of water in it, then it settled. His kettle leaked. He groped for the tin chair and took his place near the saucepan to hear when it bubbled. It would boil but not scream, like a boatswain's whistle to let him know it was ready. He heard the dog's morning whine under the boards of the house, its tail thudding to be let in, but he envied the pirogues already miles out at sea. Then he heard the first breeze washing the sea almond's wares. Last night there had been a full moon, white as his plate. He saw with his ears. He warmed with the roofs as the sun began to climb. Since the disease had obliterated vision, when the sunset shook the sea's hand for the last time, and an inward darkness grew where the moon and sun indistinctly altered, he moved by a sixth sense, like the moon without an hour or second hand, wiped clean as the plate that he now began to rinse, where the saucepan bubbled. Blindness was not the end. It was not a palm tree's dial on the noon sand. He could feel the sunlight creeping over his wrists. The sunlight moved like a cat along the palings of a sandy street. He felt it unclench the fists of the breadfruit tree in his yard, run the railings of the short iron bridge like a harp, its racing stick rippling with the river. He saw the lagoon behind the church, and in it, stuck like a basin, the rusting enamel image of the full moon. He lowered the ring to sunset under the pan. The dog scratched at the kitchen door for him to open, but he made it wait. He drummed the kitchen table with his fingers. 2 blackbirds quarreled at breakfast. Except for one hand, he sat as still as marble with his egg-white eyes, fingers recounting the past of another sea, measured by the stroking oars. Oh, open this day with a conch's moan, Omeros, as you did in my boyhood, when I was a noun gently exhaled from the palate of the sunrise. A lizard on the seawall darted its question at the waking sea, and a net of golden moss brightened the reef which the sails of their far canoes avoided. Only in you, across centuries of the sea's parchment atlas, can I catch the noise of the surf lines wandering like the shambling fleece of the lighthouse's flock, that cyclops whose blind eye shut from the sunlight. Then the canoes were galleys over which a frigate soared its scythed wings slowly. In you, the seeds of gray almonds guessed a tree's shape, and the grape leaves rusted like serrated islands, and the blind lighthouse sensing the edge of a cape, paused like a giant, a marble cloud in its hands, to hurl its boulder that splashed into phosphorus stars. Then a black fisherman, his stubbled chin coarse as a dry sea urchin's, hoisted his flour sack sail on its bamboo spar and scanned the opening line of our epic horizon. Now I can look back to rocks that see their own feet when light nets the waves, as the dugouts set out with ebony captains, since it was your light that startled our sunlit wharves, where schooners swayed idly, moored to their cold capstans. A wind turns the harbor's pages back to the voice that hummed in the vase of a girl's throat, Omeros. Omeros, she laughed. That's what we call him in Greek, stroking the small bust with its boxer's broken nose. And I thought of seven seas, sitting near the reek of drying fish nets, listening to the shallows' noise. I said, Homer and Virg are New England farmers, and the winged horse guards their gas station. You're right. I felt the foam head watching as I stroked an arm as cold as its marble, then the shoulders in winter light in the studio attic. I said, Omeros, and O was the conch shell's invocation. Mere was both mother and sea in our Antillean patois. Us, a grey bone, and the white surf as it crashes and spreads its sibilant collar on a lace shore. Omeros was the crunch of dry leaves and the washes that echoed from a cave mouth when the tide has ebbed. The name stayed in my mouth. I saw how light was webbed on her Asian cheeks, defined her eyes with a black almond's outline, as Antigone turned and said, I'm tired of America. It's time for me to go back to Greece. I miss my islands. I write, it returns. The way she turned and shook out the black gust of hair. I saw how the surf printed its lace in patterns on the shore of her neck. Then the lowering shallows of silk swirled at her ankles like surf without noise, and felt that another cold bust, not hers, but yours, saw this with stone almonds for eyes, its broken nose turning away as the rustling silk agrees. But if it could read between the lines of her floor, like a white-hot deck uncorked by Antillean heat, to the shadows in its hold, its nostrils might flare at the stench from manacled ankles, the coffled feet scraping like leaves, and perhaps the inculpable marble would have turned its white seeds away to widen the bow of its mouth at the horror under her table, from the lyre of her armchair draped with its white chiton, to do what the past always does, suffer and stare. She lay calm as a port, and a cloud covered her with my shadow. Then a prow with painted eyes slowly emerged from the fragrant rain of black hair, and I heard a hollow moan exhaled from a vase, not for kings floundering in lances of rain, the prose of abrupt fishermen cursing over canoes. Chapter 3. Touche encore. I found you, salop. Touch it again and I'll split your ass, you bitch. Which I do, ou pas prêter rien. Uni shalop, uni sen. Ou quoi say, check on pêche. I told you, borrow nothing of mine. You have a canoe and a net. Who you think you are, Logwood Hart? Ukwel say, Wagozile, vole bomb. You think you're king of Grozile, you tin stealer? Then in English, I'm going to show you who is king. Come. Hector came out from the shade, and Achille, the moment he saw him carrying the cutlass, un homme fou, a madman eaten with envy, replaced the tin he had borrowed from Hector's canoe neatly back in the prow of Hector's boat. Then Achille, who had had enough of this madman, wiped and hefted his own blade. And now the villagers emerged from the green shade of the almonds and wax-leaved manchinelles for the face-off that Hector wanted. Achille walked off and waited at the warm shallow's edge. Hector strode towards him. The villagers followed as the surf abated its sound, its fear cowering at the beach's rim. Then far out at sea, in a sparkling shower, arrows of rain arched from the emerald breakwater of the reef, the shafts traveling with clear power in the sun, and behind them, ranged for the slaughter, stood villagers shouting with a sound like the shoal and hoisting arms to the light. Hector ran splashing in shallows mixed with a drizzle towards Achille, his cutlass lifted. The surf in anger, gnashing its tail like a foaming dogfight. Men can kill their own brothers in rage, but the madman who tore Achille's undershirt from one shoulder also tore at his heart. The rage that he felt against Hector was shame. To go crazy for an old bailing tin crusted with rust? The duel of these fishermen was over a shadow, and its name was Helen. Caedmon had the oldest bar in the village. Its gingerbread balcony had mustard gables with green trim round the eaves, the paint wrinkled with age. In the cabaret downstairs, there were wooden tables for the downslap of dominoes. A bead curtain tinkled every time she came through it. A neon sign endorsed Coca-Cola under the No Pain Cafe, all welcome. The no pain was not her own idea, but her dead husband's. Is a prophecy, Caedmon would laugh. A hot street led to the beach past the small shops and the clubs and a pharmacy in whose angling shade, his khaki dog on a leash, the blind man sat on his crate after the pirogue set out, muttering the dark language of the blind, gnarled hands on his stick, his ears as sharp as the dog's. Sometimes he would sing, and the scraps blew on the wind when her beads rubbed their rosary. Old Saint-Omer. He claimed he'd sailed round the world. Monsieur Seven Seas, they christened him, from a cod liver oil label with its wriggling swordfish. But his words were not clear. They were Greek to her, or old African babble. Across wires of hot asphalt, the blind singer seemed to be numbering things. Who knows if his eyes saw through the shades, tapping his cane with one finger? She helped him draw his veteran's compensation every first of the month from the small post office. He never complained about his situation like the rest of them. The corner box and the heat on his hands would make him shift his box to the shade. Caedmon saw Philoctete hobbling up the street. So she rose from her corner window and she laid out the usual medicine for him, a flask of white acajou and a jar of yellow Vaseline, a small enamel basin of ice. He would wait in the No Pain Cafe all day. There he would lean down and anoint the mouth of the sore on his shin. Mais qui ça qui veut, Philoctete? Me blessé. But what is wrong with you, Philoctete? I am blessed with this wound, ma Caedmon, Kipaka Jewi pièce, which will never heal. Well, you must take it easy. Go home and lie down. Give the foot a little rest. Philoctete, his trouser legs rolled, stares out to sea from the worn rum shop window. The itch in the sore tingles like the tendrils of the anemone and the puffed blister of Portuguese man-o'-war. He believed the swelling came from the chained ankles of his grandfathers, or else why was there no cure? That the cross he carried was not only the anchor's but that of his race, for a village black and poor as the pigs that rooted in its burning garbage, then were hooked on the anchors of the abattoir. Ma Caedmon was sewing. She looked up and saw his face squinting from the white of the street. He was waiting to pass out on the table. This went on for days. The ice turned to warm water near the self-hating gesture of clenching his head tight in both hands. She heard the boys in blue uniforms going to school, screaming at his elbow, "Philo! Philosophie!" A mummy embalmed in Vaseline and alcohol. In the Egyptian silence, she muttered softly, "You'd have a flower somewhere, a medicine, and ways my grandmother would boil it. I used to watch ants climbing her white flower pot. But God, in which place? Where was this root? What senna, what tepid tisanes could clean the branched river of his corrupted blood, whose sap was a wounded cedar's? What did it mean, this name that felt like a fever? Well, one good heft of his garden cutlass would slice the damned name clean from its rotting yam. He said, "Merci." Then he left. Chapter 4. North of the village is a logwood grove whose thorns litter its dry shade. The broken road has boulders and quartz that glistens like rain. The logwoods were once part of an estate with its windmill as old as a village below it. The abandoned road runs past huge rusted cauldrons, vats for boiling the sugar, and blackened pillars. These are the only ruins left here by history, if history is what they are. The twisted logwood trunks are orange from sea blast. Above them is a stand of surprising cactus. Philoctete limped to his yam garden there. He passed through the estate, shuddering, cradling his cutlass, bayed at by brown, knotted sheep, repeating his name, "Bear Philoctete." Here, in the Atlantic wind, the almonds bent evenly like a candle flame. The thought of candles brought his own death to mind. The wind turned the yam leaves like maps of Africa. Their veins bled white as Philoctete, hobbling, went between the yam beds like a patient growing weaker down a hospital ward. His skin was a nettle, his head a market of ants. He heard the crabs groan from arthritic pincers. He felt a mole cricket drill his saw to the bone. His knee was radiant iron. His chest was a sack of ice, and behind the bars of his rusted teeth, like a mongoose in a cage, a scream was mad to come out. His tongue tickled its claws on the roof of his mouth, rattling its bars in rage. he saw the blue smoke from the yards, the bamboo poles weighed down by nets, the floating feather of the priest. When cutlers cut smoke, when cocks surprise their assholes by shitting eggs, he cursed, black people go get rest from God. At which point a fierce cluster of arrows targeted the saw, and he screamed in the yam rose. He stretched out the foot. He edged the razor-sharp steel through pleading finger and thumb. The yam leaves recoiled in a cold sweat. He hacked every root at the heel. He hacked them at the heel, noticing how they curled head down without their roots. He cursed the yams. Salop, you all see what it's like without roots in this world. Then sobbed, his face down in the slaughtered leaves. A sap trickled from their gaping stems like his own sorrow. A fly quickly washed its hands of the massacre. Philoctet felt an ant crawling across his brow. It was the breeze. He looked up at a blue acre and a branch where a swift settled without a cry. He felt the village through his back, heard the sea hum of transports below. The sea swift was watching him. Then it twittered seaward, swallowed in the cloud foam. For as long as it takes a single drop to dry on the wax of a dashing leaf, Philoctet lay on his pebbled spine on hot earth, watching the sky altering white continents with its geography. He would ask God's pardon. Over the quiet bay, the grass smelt good, and the clouds changed beautifully. Next he heard warriors rushing towards battle, but it was wind lifting the dead yams, the rattle of a palm's shaken spears. Herdsmen hieing cattle who set out to found no cities, they were the found. Who were bound for no victories, they were the bound. Who leveled nothing before them, they were the ground. He would be the soul of patience, like an old horse stamping one hoof in a pasture, rattling its mane, or swishing its tail as flies keep circling its sores. If a horse could endure afflictions, so could men. He held to a branch and tested his dead hoof once on the springy earth. It felt weightless as a sponge. I sat on the white terrace waiting for the check. Our waiter in a black bow tie plunged through the sand between the full deck chairs, bouncing to discotheque music from the speakers. A tray sailed in one hand. The tourists revolved, grilling their backs in their noon barbecue. The waiter was having a hard time with his leather soles. They kept sliding down a dune, but his tray teetered without spilling gin and lime on a scorched back. He was determined to meet the beach's demands like a Lawrence of St. Lucia, except that he was trudging towards a liter of self-conscious champagne. Like any born loser, he soon kicked the bucket. He rested his tray down, wiped the sand from the ice cubes, then plunked the cubes in the bucket, then the bottle. After this was done, he seemed ready to help the wife stuff her boobs in her halter while her husband sat boiling with rage like a toweled sheik. Then Lawrence frowned at a mirage. That was when I turned with him towards the village and saw through the caging wires of the noon sky a beach with its padding panther. Now the mirage dissolved to a woman with a madras head tie, but the head proud, although it was looking for work. I felt like standing in homage to a beauty that left like a ship, widening eyes in its wake. "Who the hell is that?" a tourist near my table asked the waitress. The waitress said, She too proud." As the carved lids of the unimaginable ebony mask unwrapped from its cotton wool cloud, the waitress sneered, "Helen," and all the rest followed. A far cry from Africa. A wind is ruffling the tawny pelt of Africa. Kikuyu quick as flies batten upon the bloodstreams of the veldt. Corpses are scattered through a paradise. Only the worm, kernel of carrion, cries, "Waste no compassion on these separate dead." Statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. What is that to the white child hacked in bed, to savages expendable as Jews? Threshed out by beaters, the long rushes break in a white dust of ibises whose cries have wheeled since civilization's dawn from the parched river or beast-teeming plain. The violence of beast on beast is read as natural law, but upright man seeks his divinity by inflicting pain. Delirious as these worried beasts, his wars dance to the tightened carcass of a drum, while he calls courage still that native dread of the white peace contracted by the dead. Again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of a dirty cause. Again, a waste of our compassion, as with Spain. The gorilla wrestles with the Superman. I who am poisoned with the blood of both, where shall I turn, divided to the vein? I who have cursed the drunken officer of British rule, how choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love? Betray them both, or give back what they give? How can I face such slaughter and be cool? How can I turn from Africa and live? In a green night, the orange tree in various light proclaims perfected fables, now that her last season's summer height bends from each overburdened bough. She has her winters and her spring, her moult of leaves which in their fall reveal, as with each living thing, zones truer than the tropical. For if by night each golden sun burns in a comfortable creed, by noon harsh fires have begun to quail those splendors which they feed. Or mixtures of the dew and dust that early shone her orbs of brass, mottle her splendors with the rust she sought all summer to surpass. By such strange cyclic chemistry that dooms and glories her at once as green yet aging orange tree, the mind enspheres all circumstance. No Florida, loud with citron leaves, with crystal falls to heal this age, shall calm the darkening fear that grieves the loss of visionary rage. Or if time's fires seem to blight the nature ripening into art, not the fierce noon or lampless night can quail the comprehending heart. The orange tree in various light proclaims that fable perfect now that her last season's summer height bends from each overburdened bough. God rest ye, merry gentlemen. Splitting from Jack Delaney's Sheridan Square that winter night, stewed, seasoned in bourbon, my body kindled by the whistling air snowing the village that Christ was reborn, I lurched like any lush by his own glow across towards 6 and froze before the tracks of footprints bleeding on the virgin snow. I tracked them where they led across the street to the bright side, entering the wax-sealed smell of neon human heat, some all-night diner with its wise guy cook, his tub thumb in my bowl of stew, and one man's pulped and beaten face, its look acknowledging all that white dark outside was possible. Some beast prowling the block, something fur-clotted, running wild beyond the boundary of will. Outside, more snow had fallen. My heart charred. I longed for darkness, evil that was warm. Walking, I'd stop and turn. What had I heard, wheezing behind my heel with whitening breath? Nothing. 6th Avenue yawned wet and wide. The night was white. There was nowhere to hide. Codicil. Schizophrenic, wrenched by 2 styles, one a hack's hired prose, I earned my exile. I trudged this sickle, moonlit beach for miles, tan, burned to slough off this love of ocean that's self-love. To change your language, you must change your life. I cannot right old wrongs. Waves tire of horizon and return. Gulls screech with rusty tongues above the beached, rotting pirogues. They were a venomous beaked cloud at Charlottesville. Once I thought love of country was enough. Now even if I chose, there's no room at the trough. I watch the best minds root like dogs for scraps of favor. I am nearing middle age. Burnt skin peels from my hand like paper, onion thin, like Peer Gynt's riddle. At heart there's nothing, not the dread of death. I know too many dead. They're all familiar, all in character, even how they died. On fire the flesh no longer fears that furnace mouth of earth, that kiln or ash pit of the sun, nor this clouding, unclouding sickle moon, whitening this beach again like a blank page. All its indifference is a different rage. Missing the sea. Something removed roars in the ears of this house, hangs its drapes, windless, stuns mirrors, till reflections lack substance. Some sound like the gnashing of windmills ground to a dead halt, a deafening absence, a blow. It hoops this valley, weighs this mountain, a stranger's gesture, pushes this pencil through a thick nothing now, freights cupboards with silence, folds sour laundry like the clothes of the dead, left exactly as the dead behaved by the beloved, incredulous, expecting occupancy. The Fortunate Traveler, for Susan Sontag. The epigraph is from the book of Revelations. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. It was in winter. Steeples, spires congealed like holy candles. Rotting snow flaked from Europe's ceiling. A compact man, I crossed the canal in a gray overcoat. On one lapel, a crimson buttonhole for the cold ecstasy of the assassin. In the square coffin manacled to my wrist, small countries pleaded through the mesh of graphs in treble-spaced Xeroxed forms to the World Bank, on which I had scrawled the one word, mercy. I sat on a cold bench under some skeletal lindens. 2 other gentlemen, black skins gone gray as their identical belted overcoats, crossed the White River. They spoke the stilted French of their dark river, whose hooked worm, multiplying its pale sickle, could thin the harvest of the winter streets. Then we can depend on you to get us those tractors. I gave my word. May my country ask why you are doing this, sir? Silence. You know if you betray us, you cannot hide. A tug. Smoke trailing its dark cry. At the window in Haiti, I remember a gecko pressed against the hotel glass with white palms concentrating head, with a child's hands. Merci, monsieur, merci. Famine sighs like a scythe across the field of statistics, and the desert is a moving mouth. In the hold of this earth, 10 million shoreless souls are drifting. Somalia, 765,000. Their skeletons will go under the tidal sand. We'll meet you in Bristol to conclude the agreement. Steeples like tribal lances through congealing fog. The cries of wounded church bells wrapped in cotton, gray mist enfolding the conspirator like a sealed envelope next to its heart. No one will look up now to see the jet fade like a weevil through a cloud of flour. One flies first class, one is so fortunate. Like a telescope reversed, the traveler's eye swiftly screws down the individual sorrow to an oval nest of antic numerals, and the iris, interlocking with its globe, condenses it to 0, then a cloud. Beetle black taxi from Heathrow to my flat. We are roaches, riddling the state cabinets, entering the dark holes of power, carapaced in topcoats, scuttling around columns, signaling for taxis with frantic antennae, to other huddles with roaches. We infect with optimism, and when the cabinets crack, we are the first to scuttle, radiating separately back to Geneva, Bonn, Washington, London. Under the dripping plains of Hampstead Heath, I read her letter again, watching the drizzle disfigure its pleading like mascara. Margot, I cannot bear to watch the nations cry. Then the phone. We will pay you in Bristol. Days in fetid bedclothes, swallowing cold tea. The phone stifled by the pillow. The telly, a blue storm with soundless snow. I'd light the gas and see a tiger's tongue. I was rehearsing the ecstasies of starvation for what I had to do, and have not charity. I found my pity desperately researching the origins of history, from reed-built communes by sacred lakes, turning with the first sprocketed, water-driven wheels. I smelled imagination among bestial hides by the gleam of fat, seeking in all races a common ingenuity. I envisaged an Africa flooded with such light as alchemized the first fields of emmer wheat and barley, when we savages dyed our pale dead with ochre and bordered our temples with the ceremonial vulva of the conch in the grey epoch of the obsidian adze. I sowed the Sahara with rippling cereals. My charity fertilized these aridities. What was my field? Late 16th century. My field was a dank acre. A Sussex don, I taught the Jacobean anxieties, the white devil. Flaminio's torch startles the brooding ewes. The drawn end comes in strides. I loved my Duchess, the white flame of her soul blown out between the smoking cypresses. Then I saw children pounce on green meat with a rat's ferocity. I called them up and took the train to Bristol, my blood the Severn's dregs and silver. On Severn's estuary the pieces flash, Iscariot's salary, patron saint of spies. I thought, who cares how many millions starve? Their rising souls will lighten the world's weight and level its gull-glittering waterline. We left at sunset down the estuary. England recedes. The forked white gull screeches circling back. Even the birds are pulled back by their orbit. Even mercy has its magnetic field. Back in the cabin, I uncapped the whiskey. The porthole mists with glaucoma. By the time I'm pissed, England will be that pale, serrated indigo on the sea line. You're so fortunate, you get to see the world. Indeed, sirs, I have seen the world. Spray splashes the portholes and vision blurs. Leaning on the hot rail, watching the hot sea, I saw them far off, kneeling on hot sand in the pious genuflections of the locust, as Ponce's armored knees crush Florida to the funereal fragrance of white lilies. Now I have come to where the phantoms live. I have no fear of phantoms, but of the real, the Sabbath benedictions of the islands, treble clef of the snail on the scored leaf, the tantum ergo of black choristers soars through the organ pipes of coconuts. Across the dirty beach surplice with lace, they pass a brown lagoon behind the priest, pale and unshaven in his frayed soutane, into the concrete church at Canaries. As Albert Schweitzer moves to the harmonium of morning, and to the pluming chimneys the groundswell lifts, Lebensraum, Lebensraum. Black faces sprinkled with continual dew, dew on the speckled croton, dew on the hard leaf of the knotted plum tree, dew on the elephant ears of the dasheen. Through Kurtz's teeth, white skull in elephant grass, the imperial fiction sings. Sunday wrinkles down river from the heart of darkness. The heart of darkness is not Africa. The heart of darkness is the core of fire in the white center of the Holocaust. The heart of darkness is the rubber claw selecting a scalpel in antiseptic light, the hills of children's shoes outside the chimneys, the tinkling nickel instruments on the white altar. Jacob, in his last card, sent me these verses. Think of a God who doesn't lose his sleep if trees burst into tears or glaciers weep. So aping his indifference, I write now, not Anno Domini, after Dachau. The night maid brings a lamp and draws the blinds. I stay out on the veranda with the stars, breakfast congealed to supper on its plate. There is no sea as restless as my mind. The promontories snore, they snore like whales. Cetus, the whale, was Christ. The ember dies, the sky smokes like an ash heap. Reeds wash their hands of guilt, and the lagoon is stained. Louder since it rained, a gauze of sandflies hisses from the marsh. Since God is dead, and these are not his stars, but man-lit, sulphurous sanctuary lamps, it's in the heart of darkness of this earth that backward tribes keep vigil of his body, in Dea, Lampion, and this bedside lamp. Keep the news from their blissful ignorance. Like lice, the hungry of this earth swarm to the tree of life. If those who starve like these rainflies who shed glazed wings in light grew from sharp shoulder blades their brittle vans and soared towards that tree, how it would seethe, justice. But fires drench them like vermin, quotas prevent them, and they remain compassionate fodder for the travel book, its paragraphs like windows from a train. For everywhere that earth shows its rib cage, and the moon goggles with the eyes of children, we turn away to read. Rimbaud learned that. Rimbaud at dusk, idling his wrist in water past temples the plumed dates still protect in Roman file, knew that we cared less for one human face than for the scrolls in Alexandria's ashes, that the bright water could not dye his hand any more than poetry. The dow's silhouette moved through the blinding coinage of the river that endlessly, until we pay one debt, shrouds every night an ordinary secret. The drawn sword comes in strides. It stretches for the length of the empty beach. The fishermen's huts shut their eyes tight. A frisson shakes the palm trees and sweats on the traveler's tree. They've found out my sanctuary. Philippe, last night. It had 2 gentlemen in the village yesterday, sir, asking for you while you was in town. I tell them you was in town. They sent to tell you there is no hurry. They will be coming back. In loaves of cloud, and have not charity. The weevil will make a Sahara of Kansas. The ant shall eat Russia. Their soft teeth shall make, and have not charity, the harvest desolation, and the brown globe crack like a begging bowl. And though you fire oceans of surplus grain, and have not charity, still through thin stalks the smoking stubble stalks grasshopper, third horseman, the leather-helmed locust. season of phantasmal peace. Then all the nations of birds lifted together the huge net of the shadows of this earth, in multitudinous dialects, twittering tongues, stitching and crossing it. They lifted up the shadows of long pines down trackless slopes, the shadows of glass-faced towers down evening streets, the shadow of a frail plant on a city sill, the net rising soundless as night, the birds' cries soundless, until there was no longer dusk or season, decline or weather, only this passage of phantasmal light that not the narrowest shadow dared to sever. And men could not see, looking up, what the wild geese drew, what the ospreys trailed behind them in silvery ropes that flashed in the icy sunlight. They could not hear battalions of starlings waging peaceful cries, bearing the net higher, covering this world like the vines of an orchard, or a mother drawing the trembling gauze over the trembling eyes of a child fluttering to sleep. It was a light that you will see at evening on the side of a hill in yellow October, and no one hearing knew what change had brought into the raven's cawing, the kildare's screech, the ember circling chuff, such an immense, soundless, and high concern for the fields and cities where the birds belong, except it was their seasonal passing, love made seasonless, or from the high privilege of their birth, something brighter than pity for the wingless ones below them, who shared dark holes in windows and in houses. And higher they lifted the net with soundless voices, above all change, betrayals of falling suns. And this season lasted one moment, like the pause between dusk and darkness, between fury and peace. But for such as our earth is now, it lasted long. Endings. Things do not explode. They fail. They fade. As sunlight fades from the flesh, as the foam drains quick in the sand. Even love's lightning flash has no thunderous end. It dies with the sound of flowers fading, like the flesh from sweating pumice stone. Everything shapes this, till we are left with the silence that surrounds Beethoven's head. The fist clenched around my heart loosens a little, and I gasp brightness, but it tightens again. When have I ever not loved the pain of love? But this has moved past love to mania. This has the strong clench of the madman. This is gripping the ledge of unreason before plunging howling into the abyss. Hold hard, then, heart. This way, at least you live. Love after love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Volcano. Joyce was afraid of thunder, but lions roared at his funeral from the Zurich Zoo. Was it Zurich or Trieste? No matter. These are legends as much as the death of Joyce is a legend, or the strong rumor that Conrad is dead and that victory is ironic. On the edge of the night horizon from this beach house on the cliffs, there are now till dawn 2 glares from the miles out at sea derricks. They are like the glow of the cigar and the glow of the volcano at victory's end. One could abandon writing for the slow-burning signals of the great, to be instead the ideal reader, ruminative, voracious, making the love of masterpieces superior to attempting to repeat or outdo them, and be the greatest reader in the world. At least it requires awe, which has been lost to our time. So many people have seen everything. So many people can predict. So many refuse to enter the silence of victory, the indolence that burns at the core. So many are no more than erect ash, like the cigar. So many take thunder for granted. How common is the lightning, how lost the leviathans we no longer look for. There were giants in those days. In those days, they made good cigars. I must read more carefully. Saint Lucie, the villages. Laborie, Choiseul, Vieux-Fort, Dennery. From these sun-bleached villages, where the church bell caves in the sides of one gray, scurfed shack that is shuttered with warped boards, with rust, with crabs crawling under the house shadow where the children played house, a net rotting among cans, the sea net of sunlight trawling the shallows, catching nothing all afternoon. From these I am growing no nearer to what secret eluded the children under the house shade, in the far bell, the noon's stunned amethystine sea. Something always being missed between the floating shadow and the pelican, in the smoke from over the next bay, in that shack on the lip of the sand spit, whatever the seagulls cried out for, through the gray drifting ladders of rain and the great gray tree of the waterspout, for which the dolphins kept diving, that should have rounded the day. Pomerac, Otahiti apple, pomme citer, pomme granette, moubin, zanana, the pineapple's Aztec helmet, palm. I have forgotten what palm for the Irish potato, cerise the cherry, zaman, sea almonds, by the crisp sea bursts, O Baudelaire. Come back to me, my language. Come back, Kako, Gris-Gris, Solitaire, Ciseaux, the scissor bird. No nightingales except once in the indigo mountains of Jamaica. Blue depth, deep as coffee. Flicker of pimento. The shaft light on a yellow ackee. the bark alone bare. Jardin en montagne, en haut habitation, the wet leather reek of the hill donkey. Evening opens at a text of fireflies. In the mountain huts, tikai habitation, candles, candle flies, the black night bending cups in its hard palms, cool, thin water. This is important water. Important, imported. Water is important. Also, very important, the red rust drum. The evening deep as coffee. The morning powerful, important coffee. The villages shut all day in the sun. In the empty schoolyard, teacher dead today. The fruit rotting yellow on the ground, dyes from Gauguin. The pomme arac dyes the earth purple. The ochre road still waiting in the sun for my shadow. Oh, so you is Walcott, you is Roddy brother, teacher Alec's son, and the small rivers with important names. And the important corporal in the country station, habitation, looking towards the thick green slopes of cocoa, the sun that melts the asphalt at noon, and the woman in the shade of the breadfruit bent over the lip of the valley. Below her, blue-green, the lost valleys of sugar, the bus rides, the fields of bananas. The tanker still rusts in the lagoon at Roseau, and around what corner was uttered a single yellow leaf from the frangipani, a tough bark, reticent, but when it flowers delivers hard lilies, pungent, recalling Martina or Eunice or Lucilla, who comes down the steps with the cool side flow as spring water eases over shelves of rock in some green ferny hole by the road in the mountains, her smile like the whole country, her smell earth, red-brown earth, her armpits a reaping, her arms saplings, an old woman that she is now, with other generations of daughters flowing down the steps, Jean Bitation, Belle Tiffy Bitation, until the teeth go and all the rest. Oh, Martinas, Lucillas, I'm a wild golden apple that will burst with love of you and your men, those I never told enough, with my young poet's eyes crazy with the country. Generations going, generations gone. Moi c'est Jean Saint-Lucie, c'est là moi sorti, is there that I born. The sea is history. Where are your monuments, your battles, martyrs? Where is your tribal memory? Sirs, in that gray vault, the sea. The sea has locked them up. The sea is history. First, there was the heaving oil, heavy as chaos. Then, like a light at the end of a tunnel, the lantern of a caravel. And that was Genesis. Then there were the packed cries, the shit, the moaning. Exodus. Bone, soldered by coral to bone. Mosaics mantled by the benediction of the shark's shadow. That was the Ark of the Covenant. Then came from the plucked wires of sunlight on the sea floor the plangent harps of the Babylonian bondage as the white cowries clustered like manacles on the drowned women, and those were the ivory bracelets of the Song of Solomon. But the ocean kept turning blank pages looking for history. Then came the men with eyes heavy as anchors, who sank without tombs, brigands who barbecued cattle, leaving their charred ribs like palm leaves on the shore. Then the foaming, rabid maw of the tidal wave, swallowing Port Royal, and that was Jonah. But where is your Renaissance? Sir, it is locked in them sea sands out there, past the reef's moiling shelf, where the men-o'-war floated down. Strap on these goggles, I'll guide you there myself. It's all subtle and submarine through colonnades of coral, past the Gothic windows of sea fans, to where the crusty grouper, onyx-eyed, blinks, weighted by its jewels like a bald queen. And these groined caves with barnacles pitted like stone are our cathedrals, and the furnace before the hurricanes, Gomorrah. Bones ground by windmills into marl and corn meal, and that was Lamentations. That was just Lamentations, it was not history. Then came like scum on the river's drying lip, the brown reeds of villages mantling and congealing into towns, and at evening the midges' choirs, and above them the spires lancing the side of God as his sun set, and that was the New Testament. Then came the white sisters clapping to the wave's progress, and that was emancipation. Jubilation, oh jubilation, vanishing swiftly as the sea's lace dries in the sun. But that was not history. That was only faith. And then each rock broke into its own nation. Then came the synod of flies. Then came the secretarial heron. Then came the bullfrog bellowing for a vote. Fireflies with bright ideas, and bats like jetting ambassadors, and the mantis like khaki police, and the furred caterpillars of judges examining each case closely. And then, in the dark airs of ferns, and in the salt chuckle of rocks with their sea pools, there was the sound, like a rumor without any echo, of history really beginning. A scene from the Odyssey. Odysseus encounters the Cyclops. Billy Blue, the narrator, sings. To die for the eye is best. It's the greatest glory. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. There is no eye after the eye, no more history, except his own, Odysseus. This was his first story. A sea like lead, heavy as time's weight in water, and a sullen harbor eternally overcast. Not a seabird beating, 1,000 years in the future. Time altering the bodies where they were encased. Scene, a long, gray, empty wharf, a sheep's carcass gutted, hanging from a pole. An oil drum rolls on, chased by the philosopher who rummages in the contents of the drum. Odysseus, Eurylochus, and 2 sailors enter. This is frightening, sir. What kind of city is this? Like one long Sabbath, an infinite empty wharf. The philosopher runs towards them. History is repeated, a second Odysseus. Stop. Wanderer, you'll need advice. Listen, buzz off. They praised you once, Odysseus, forbidden phantom. Sir, none of my virtues is nobler than all men's. Well, now you hear to what quiet a country can come. Apart from this bleating of sheep herded in pens. Sir, everywhere there's the sign of this giant eye. A man becomes nothing at that zero's bidding. Is this the Greece that I loved? Is this my city? Philosophy's cradle where thought is forbidden? Can I see the eye? No, rather the eye sees us. The eye is their shepherd and the nation are his sheep. Return to that age of heroes, Odysseus. I'd like to see this monster. Does it ever weep? No. And the wall? Erected to keep us in pens. So this city is nothing but a giant cave. With history erased, there's just the present tense. I breach walls for a freedom that men dare not crave. Listen, what to the eye is best, the greatest glory? Dulce et decorum est, to die for a lie with zest pro patria mori. There is no art, no theater, no circuses even. This is the era of the gray colonel's gray reign. So one cold eye is all these Greeks know of heaven? Their statues weep with grime over history's ruin. Eurylochus, shake me, wake me up from this dream. The cave is blocked, we can't leave, Captain Odysseus. The future happens no matter how much we scream. The eye has found us. Obey, do what it says. Two patrolmen enter. Do not talk to this one, he has slandered the eye. My turn has come. By the way, what is your name, sir? My name is Socrates, Aristotle, Lucretius, philosopher. He is marched up against a wall, clubbed, then held upright. Lower your heads, you sheep. The great shepherd is here. The door opens and the Cyclops slowly approaches. Sound of cheering crowds distantly. The philosopher recites. Yet I was one among many thousands in the square, but always too late, too far at the back to see the smiles of the tiny faces on the balcony. Those in front with the caps, braids, and medals, and those at the rear in coats and identical hats, who didn't wave like the central one, turning both profiles repeatedly into a coin or a postage stamp. I had to be there with the roaring victims who craned or held up children and yelped and jumped high like dogs that you were training in that boxed, crammed square that felt like a mass grave, to a drifting smell of formaldehyde or adrenaline. Learn what I remember, that someday it could save. But I swear on my grave, now that it's all over and the square and the balcony empty, I was there, but I didn't wave. Let the Greeks remember Odysseus the brave. The patrolmen remove him. The Cyclops faces Odysseus. Don't stare. Sorry. What is your name? Nobody. Where are you from? Nowhere. Where are you going? I don't know. Nobody. From nowhere. Going where he doesn't know. Normal, no? Yes. What do you believe in? Nothing. For now. Nothing. Not the great eye? Not yet. Not yet. Yet. Why not yet? I don't know you. I see all. Everything. You believe I see all? No. No. You don't see anybody. I see you. I'm nobody. So you said. All you see is nobody and nothing. The eye likes you. The ugliest thing is a liar, so you're really ugly, sir. No, how ugly am I? Man, you're so ugly nobody would believe it, except you. I'm nobody, dude. You're ugly, I believe it. God, what accent is that? I'm going to die. Oh, you will, boss. Stop, you're making me cry. Laughter and tears, right? Pouring from the one eye. I'm exhausted. You're funny. I'll see you again. Not if I see you first, man. You're a killer, nobody. Not as much as you, my man. You're coming to dinner. I thought I was dinner. The Cyclops exits. Eurylochus and the two sailors get up and join Odysseus. What do we do now? Think, Captain Odysseus. You must have some ideas. You're famous for scheming. Let me think. There's some way out of this. They're coming back. Oh, God, let us all be dreaming. Two patrolmen return. Come on then, they need us. Don't whimper, don't bend. Generations of men like seeds flung on the wind. Listen, the Cyclops likes me, sir. I'm his good friend. Oh God, sir, oh God, please, Captain, leave him behind. Scene 9. A dinner table, night. Odysseus and the Cyclops eating, attended by Ram, a manservant. Know what you're eating? Your men, as good as sheep. And you know what they call these drops from my eyes? Tears. My eyes cloud when I laugh. You must teach me to weep. Well, first you must lose things you loved. Then cry like this? Not quite. I like laughing. Make me laugh, little man. Make you laugh. All right? Know why I can cross my eyes? No, why? God gave us two eyes because we're human. I'm not. One is for laughter. The other one cries. Do it. Show me. Ram, come here. Take a look at this. Very good, sir. Nobody I know can do it. I love nobody. Same here. Nobody loves you. Look, why do you need two eyes? One does just as well. For balance, proportion, contrast. Mortals need two. I'm a demigod. Left, right, good, bad, heaven, hell. I have deified myself, son of Poseidon. I know your father, the sea. He doesn't like me. Why, I'll talk to him. Gods, who knows what side they're on. He's rough-tempered most times, but he can act calmly. Put in a good word, then. I'm trying to get home. Home? You're home now. Well, this wasn't quite my idea. Not your idea. There are no ideas in this kingdom. I've a wife, you see, like my eyes. We make one pair. Where's that, my little friend? Tell me where you come from. A rock, too stony for horses, with swirling shores. What flocks do you have? Goats, sheep? Is it a kingdom? Yes. And are you its king? Yes. But it's not like yours. In what way? Its subjects don't end up on skewers. Like your men, you mean? Right. How many have I eaten? Of my crew, just 2, I suppose. Before them, scores. They're tenderized by torches. The flesh is beaten, while your sheep bleat in fear of their devourer. But I'm saving you for last. Well, that's very kind. Thank you. 2 of my crew and 1 philosopher. Is this him? No more ideas, the last of his kind. Odysseus holds the skewer over the flame. Look how this little iron lance glows at the tip. Stick it in the meat. Too hot. Ram, get a clean one. No, it's all right. I'll pick it up. Ram, a clean skewer. No, really, leave it alone. Ram exits. Odysseus on his knees looking, gets near the door. That's the way I am. Sorry, I hate losing things. Get off your knees. My men, my money, my way home. Your life next. That I don't mind. Just hate losing things. Cyclops, I'll help you look. That's 3 eyes. Fine. Where did it go? It couldn't have gone far, and Ram will be back soon. I give up, but I hate to. One thing you should know. What's that? The sky goes pitch black when there is no moon. He crawls near the Cyclops, takes out the skewer, blinds him. Blackout, sirens moaning. Cyclops, nobody has escaped. Nobody blinded me. Repeat, no one has escaped. Keep looking for him. Nobody's escaped. Nobody's blinded the eye. Nobody, you hear me? Nobody is his name. Son of Poseidon, you obscene octopus, you ton of squid shit with your eye-pouring black ink. My name is not nobody, it's Odysseus. And learn, you bloody tyrants, that men can still think.
We hope you've enjoyed this program from Caedmon. To order additional cassettes or to receive a complete catalog of Harper Audio and Caedmon titles, please call us at 1-800-331-3761. That's 1-800-331-3761. Thank you.